everyone. My name is Mandy Crespo, and I am the lead of the BDO Canada Accessibility Consulting Practice. Welcome to the BDO Accessibility Spotlight. For those of you who are new to this channel, the BDO Accessibility Spotlight is an opportunity for us to showcase some of the great work happening across Canada in the space of accessibility for persons with disabilities. Today, we have a fantastic guest with us, Lizna Husani Pukta. Lizna is the Senior Manager of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion and Accessibility Lead at Coast Capital Savings. Lizna has worked in the disability space for many years as an occupational therapist specializing in disability management, accommodations, and accessibility. I have the pleasure of working closely with Lizna, and I constantly learn from her vast subject matter expertise. So I'm excited that Lizna can pass along some of that expertise with us here today. Thank you so much for being here, Lizna.
Thank you for that, Mandy. I'm so happy to be here.
So, Lizna, I know your leadership in accessibility is informed by your professional experience as well as your lived experience of disability. Tell me a little bit more about your background and the work you do.
Yes, my background as an occupational therapist has been fundamental in shaping my approach to accessibility. Working directly with people with disabilities has taught me the importance of a tailored, practical solutions approach that truly improve individuals' lives. The experience has underscored how essential accessibility is, not just as a concept, but as a daily reality, how it affects how people live and work. The real shift in my focus came during the COVID-19 pandemic. I noticed that workplace policies being introduced at that time weren't really benefiting people with disabilities, as well as other groups like racialized employees, single moms, and frontline workers. This was really a wake-up call for me about the gaps in our systems, and it propelled me to move into a role where I could work on these issues at a much larger scale. And now I'm here at Coast Capital, and I combine my professional insights and my personal experiences as a mom to a child with a disability and as a South Asian woman with a hidden disability to lead the equity, diversity, and inclusion and accessibility efforts. And so my role here involves dismantling barriers and ensuring our policies and spaces is inclusive to everyone. Additionally, my work with the Canadian Credit Union Association's DEI working group and a nonprofit Balance for Blind Adults allows me to extend these efforts beyond my organization and influencing wider policies and practices to create more inclusive environments within the credit union sector and beyond.
Yeah. That's a lot of things that you're doing, Lizna, and I always am so amazed at everything you're able to do, both in your own personal life and supporting your kids and your family, and then also all the work you're doing at Coast, and you still make time to support disability and accessibility beyond. So it's really awesome to see all that you are a part of and how much effort you've put into improving accessibility. So the accessibility team at BDO has been working with Coast Capital for almost 2 years now, working on advancing accessibility. And I've been really, really impressed with all of the changes that you've been able to make. What do you feel have been the biggest wins for accessibility at Coast in the last few years?
Thank you, Mandy. I'm really, really glad that our efforts have resonated positively with you. When we first started enhancing accessibility, the scope of what we aim to achieve seemed really daunting, but this journey has been enriched with genuine enthusiasm and commitment from our employees and leadership to foster that change, which has been really inspiring. I'm particularly proud of the momentum our Disability Employee Resource Group has gained, boosting awareness and engagement across the organization. It's their momentum that is the key driver in our achievements. Our major wins over the past few years, I would say, can be distinctly seen across 3 areas: data, training, and cultural impact. First, in terms of data, we've significantly enhanced our feedback mechanisms. We engage directly with employees and members with disabilities to identify barriers that they encounter. Regular surveys help us pinpoint those accessibility barriers when they're banking with Coast Capital. Furthermore, our intensified data collection efforts have improved our understanding of workforce demographics and whether persons with disabilities are applying for roles at Coast Capital, which helps us tailor our initiatives and measure our progress effectively. Moving to training, our staff has participated in role-specific training covering topics of web and digital accessibility, accessibility in the built environment, and accessibility in procurement. I'm particularly excited about is our next steps. Soon we'll be rolling out a comprehensive accessibility training program for all staff. This program is designed to enhance our collective understanding and implementation of accessibility across the entire organization. Lastly, on the cultural impact front, the Disability Employee Resource Group has been incredibly active, especially during National Accessibility Week and National Disability Employment Awareness Month, organizing events to educate our employees, engage them on accessibility and disability issues. Moreover, they fostered really safe spaces for employees to share their personal stories and experiences related to disability. It's these initiatives that have been pivotal in shifting our organizational culture to integrate accessibility discussions really early in our process and making it a core consideration on the outset. I think all these initiatives combined highlight our progress, but also it's setting the stage for ongoing enhancements, reinforcing that commitment of becoming an inclusive and accessible workplace.
That's you said a lot of things, and to think of all of that has happened just within the last few years. That's really an incredible feat, and I know a lot of that is it's you and the leadership role that you've played within that. So it's really is an impressive thing that you've done at Coast. I know it's other people too. There's been a lot of people involved, but it's really been neat to be a part of. The thing that I wanted to yeah, and what I really appreciate about what you said is. I know you're working to comply with the Accessible Canada Act, which has 7 different priority areas, but the things that you just named that you're most proud of are not directly the pillars of the Accessible Canada Act. It's that laying that foundation for how people understand accessibility and disability, how they work together, and that thread of understanding is throughout all those things that you mentioned. So I appreciate how Coast has come at this of both. Let's get to the foundation. Let's make sure we're all on the same page. Let's make sure we understand where we are right now, and then let's also work on removing barriers.
100%. We got to start somewhere, and it's building awareness. If you think about the change management curve, the number one thing is to build that awareness, and where do we start that? And having conversations, participating in formal training. Our ERG is a big driver of all those education and awareness sessions that is critical for really driving cultural change and embedding accessibility into the DNA of our organization.
Yeah. And so when you're talking about all that you've done as an organization, I'll say as BDO Canada, when we go out to organizations, often one of the first things we hear is there is just so much we need to do as an organization to get better, to be accessible for persons with disabilities. And they always ask us, where do we start? What should we prioritize? How has Coast Capital prioritized which barriers to address first in its efforts to improve workplace accessibility and inclusion?
Absolutely. It's quite common and completely understandable to feel overwhelmed when you're trying to tackle accessibility. And at Coast Capital, we went through a similar phase. Last year, your team at BDO conducted a thorough accessibility audit of our organization, identifying 46 barriers and providing us with 103 recommendations. The task of organizing and prioritizing these recommendations was daunting, but with a clear and effective approach, we were able to make some headway. Right from the start, we brought together individuals from across the organization. This early involvement proved to be crucial, not just from an initial assessment, but throughout the entire decision-making process. Having everyone's voice from the beginning really helped shape our path forward. And then we moved into a stage where we started evaluating the recommendations, and we used specific criteria to assess the feasibility of each initiatives. We asked questions like, can it be implemented within 3 years? Can it be managed within the current team? What resources will it require? Does it need cross-functional efforts? We also then considered how each action would align with regulatory requirements and what impact it could have. For instance, we evaluated actions against the standards like the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, considering how it could affect both employee engagement and member experience for persons with disabilities. We then visualized these findings and we mapped out our recommendations on a graph with 4 quadrants representing impact and effort. This allowed us to help which actions were high impact and easy to implement. Our low-hanging fruits, which we prioritized for immediate action, high impact but difficult to implement, were actions that we acknowledged as important and earmarked for our long-term strategic plans beyond the 3 years. And then we were selective with low-impact actions. We pursued the ones that we could enhance our reputation with minimal effort, but decided against pursuing the ones that were difficult to implement with low impact. And it's this structured approach, we then reconvened with our stakeholders. And it wasn't just about presenting the outcome of this decision framework, but it was about engaging with them in a dialogue, seeking their feedback, asking us to challenge our decisions. And it's after these thorough discussions, we prioritized 54 actions from the 103 recommendations that you gave us into our accessibility action plan. So this approach has not only made the overwhelming manageable, but it also ensured that our efforts were impactful and aligned with both our values and our legal obligations.
Yeah. And I know it was quite the process you went through. But I think what has, at least from my perspective, what worked so well is, like you said, you engaged with people throughout that process. So you had ideas of what you felt like would be the most impactful. And then you ran that past people and you got feedback and you had conversations. And so all of that conversation has led you to the point now where now you're acting on it and you're not trying to get buy-in as you go near as much as you would have. So it's allowed you, I think, to move a little bit quicker now that you're on the other side of that decision-making process.
Yeah, and I will continuously remind folks, remember, this is the reason why we chose it, and having that documented really, really helped us with reminding ourselves why we made the decision to move forward with certain initiatives, because it's quite a bit, right?
Yeah.
We still have 54 actions that we're committed to in this 3-year plan.
Yeah. So I know there's a lot of organizations in Canada who are just starting to think about accessibility for persons with disabilities. As someone who has gone through this journey over the last few years of assessing the organization, coming up with barriers that people are facing, doing lots of consultation, getting leadership on board. You've taken all of these steps. What advice would you give organizations who are just starting out in their accessibility journey?
For organizations just beginning to think about enhancing accessibility for persons with disabilities, I'd offer advice centered around 4 key areas. First, it is essential to understand where you're starting from to know where you want to go. So conduct that thorough assessment of your organization's current strengths and areas of needing change to provide you with a solid foundation of your accessibility initiatives. This initial step for us was really, really crucial to set the groundwork for targeted improvements. Secondly, involve people from across the organization right from the start is crucial. Accessibility can impact so many different aspects of the organization, potentially affecting numerous stakeholders. This is where the strategic change management comes into play. Keep these individuals engaged at the beginning, throughout the process, especially in the decision-making process, ensuring a broad range of perspectives are included. This also helps foster a sense of ownership and commitment to the changes, which is essential for effective change management, as you've already said yourself. Third, have a clear documented plan on how decisions are made regarding what goes into your accessibility action plan. A structured plan is invaluable as it systematically addresses accessibility and ensures that no critical aspect is overlooked. Lastly, and what I would probably say is the most important one, is always remember the principles of nothing about us without us. A truly effective plan is centered around persons with disabilities. It's their insights they're the ones that provide the valuable insights because they're the ones who experience the barriers firsthand. Integrate their perspectives will make your efforts more targeted and impactful. So I would say, in a nutshell, take those 4 CREE principles, but also I would say that we've learned a lot in this journey ourselves, and that achieving equity, diversity, inclusion, encompassing accessibility is rarely a straightforward or linear process. And our journey towards better accessibility has been challenging, but it's requiring us to commit and a commitment and willingness to learn both from our successes and our challenges. Yeah. And we're continuously learning and adapting, and this ongoing process will ultimately drive meaningful progress in accessibility.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point, Lizna, that it's that continuous process. You have to keep working on it all the time. And also that I love your thought on that it's that continuous involvement of people with disabilities and continuous buy-in from leadership. It's not just a one and done with accessibility. You have to keep going, and you've got to get people's opinions and thoughts throughout the process. So I love that's the approach that Coast has taken.
Yeah, you're always going to learn from this experience of what your intentions are, and then as you go and you fail, you say, what did I learn from this failure, right? And then you pivot and you adapt it, as with any type of initiative. And I think that stays true for any accessibility initiatives you're gonna embark on, that there's going to be some learnings and they're going to have some great momentum, and that's sometimes that things are going to die, go through that ebbs and flows of it. And I truly believe that it's that commitment that we need to keep going. Progress is progress. This is it's not a sprint, right? Yeah. It's a marathon. We're in it for the long haul, and it's going to take us years to be able to achieve what we really truly want, which is an accessible and inclusive Canada for persons with disabilities. Yeah.
I think that's the perfect place to end, Lizna. Thank you so much for your time today. I just appreciate working with you so much, and we have lots and lots of conversations similar to this all the time. So it's great to get this out there so other people can learn from all the experience you have as well. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Mandy, for having me. Appreciate it.